Hey everybody, welcome back to Spiritual Paradise. Today we have Christina on the show. Hey Christina.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. So Christina is a Sagittarius Sun, a Scorpio Moon, and a Libra Rising. Christina, do you feel like you and your placements match very well?
Yes, I 100% feel like my placements just match me perfectly.
Yeah, I do
I
too. Okay, so today we're going to be discussing communication in relationships because I feel like that's with Mercury going retrograde today. That's just something that I feel like we should just talk about with everybody. So, Christina, how do you feel like? What do you feel is the number one communication killer in relationships?
the number one communication killer in relationships to me is I feel like some people they're like they're just afraid, and I feel like they're not used to expressing themselves, so it results in, I would say, them either like avoiding it or they're not being honest with themselves. So on the other party, they could be like, oh, like, what's going on? Like, oh, do they not like me? Like, is the issue might be bigger than what it really is, because people, I feel like, aren't always honest with themselves, because, and sometimes they don't even know how to be honest with themselves.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Sometimes people don't know how to be honest with themselves. And like what self honesty looks like is really just doing what is uncomfortable to you at
Hmm.
times. Like sometimes we may not want to talk about certain topics with our partner, even with our friends, those close to us, just because of us not wanting to admit something with ourselves. So self honesty, if you're not going to be honest with yourself, then it's going to be difficult for you to be honest in your relationship. So
Exactly.
you have to start being honest with yourself. So Christina, how do you feel like for people who struggle with self honesty, what is something that you would give them for some advice?
For some advice, um, I'm trying to think on what I did. So I know everyone may not know, I guess, where to start, but with me, it's like a feeling you have inside yourself. So the first step I feel would be like to really pay attention to how you're feeling internally. And then from there, I would say maybe start journaling. Some people always don't feel comfortable talking to maybe their friends, or maybe they have friends that they're like, "Oh, girl, why are you still messing with him?" You have to trust yourself. That's the main thing the main advice I would give. Trust yourself, and it's okay to talk to your friends, but if you do what works for you, like, be comfortable within yourself. But I journal. I wasn't always consistent with journaling, but I've realized, when I was more consistent, it's nice to get those feelings out and to like look at them, because it's easy for us to, you know, yeah, I'm gonna do that, or oh, I know what to do. But when you're like writing down in the moment, so say you're like really upset and you're like, I just, you're just so, things are everywhere. It's not making sense. It's just like an overload in your brain. Taking your journal and writing down like what's making you mad, because you know what's making you mad.
Right.
And you can be honest with this little piece of paper. Maybe not to somebody, but so that would be some advice I would give to
That
some.
is perfect. That's perfect. And for someone who, because I know like I get this question a lot. People say, what do I write about? Where do I start writing? Like what advice would you give someone with a question like that?
Honestly, I would say it doesn't matter. Like, just put something on that paper. So it could be, I know with me, like a couple of days ago, I was feeling good that day. So just because you're feeling good doesn't mean, you don't have to write the negative. So I'll start, okay, this is how I'm feeling. And you'll realize maybe when you start talking about how good you're feeling, right? Maybe something isn't, maybe there's something in there that's like, okay, this is kind of bothering me. So I would just say, just start with wherever and with anything, and then you'll find yourself. I know I found myself, you just start going and just you're like talking to yourself, or like, you're like really expressing yourself, getting everything out. So I would say it doesn't matter. You can do poems to yourself. I know like a couple of days ago, I wrote a letter to myself 5 years from now, and how I wanted to see myself. So, and that kind of, I like reading stuff like that. Like, I write down some stuff in like a 2 years. I'm like, wow, this is where I was 2 years ago. So start anywhere, and just write freely. It's not, you're not in school, it doesn't have to be like assignment based. Just write what's your heart, what you feel inside. That's the best advice I would give.
Yes, I absolutely love that. And I highly recommend journaling, writing every day in some type of way. Like it doesn't have to be a story, but just writing your current thoughts, or even writing the to your future self, is really helpful and beneficial. I also, that's good that you brought up the whole writing topic, because I know sometimes when in our relationships, when we are arguing or we're going through like a rough patch, at times we may not know how to address like the conflict, the confrontation. So, the question that people ask is, when do I talk about the problem? Like, when do I talk about the issues? And I want to say this. I want to say that writing about it prior to talking about the problem could give you a different perspective that's outside of your own, especially if you're someone who struggles with being stubborn, having a hard time seeing the other person's perspective. You might want to just take time to yourself to write how you feel about the conflict before you actually handle it. So, Christina, what do you think? When do you think is the best time to actually talk about the issue?
Okay, so first I would say it kind of, in my opinion, depends on where you are in the relationship and how well you know that person. Because some people, I know with me, if I meet someone, I don't feel comfortable because I don't know what their triggers are. I don't know, if they might. I never want anyone to take what I say in a negative light, or because that's not my intent. So I would say it depends on where you are in the relationship. If you know the person like the back of your hand, you know their triggers. I would just say be respectful. So if someone communicates with you, like, I know one of my best friends, she's like, I like to talk about stuff right then and there, because I don't like there for to be miscommunication, confusion, and I don't want someone walking away thinking something that's not true. So, but how she is, and she's a Cancer, she doesn't like to talk about things like right at the moment. She needs time to process it and to think, and she'll reach out to me. So when she let me know that, I respected that. So if there was an issue, I gave her space, and she reached out to me, and we talked about it. So it just depends on who you're dealing with, I would say, because in just the type of person you are. But I don't think about just myself. I don't think about myself. I think about how, or what I say, how can it affect other people. So that's the best advice I would give. If it's someone kind of new and fresh, um, and you have no issues, I would say you can, texting isn't always the best because some people may take it a different way. But if you talk on the phone with them, or, I would just give them a call and just say, hey, make sure you let them know that their feelings are valid, because it doesn't matter like if you didn't mean to. I just always like, I'm sorry I made you feel that way, period. And just kind of go from there, and it should flow. If the other person really cares, and they're really trying, and they're open to having this conversation, it should be no problem.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's what
I
I would.
absolutely agree. And it's like I like also like to do that, especially even if I don't like see maybe how I offended you.
Mm-hmm.
If I know that you were offended, or something like did rub you the wrong way, then it's fine to apologize for that, y'all. Like,
Yeah.
apologize for making someone feel that time, even if it wasn't your intention, because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they feel that way. So,
Right.
just
I
think.
was like the butt friend. I would be like, well, I'm sorry, but like, and I realized like I'm like, okay, let me take the but out, even though that's how I feel. They're like, it's not an apology if you have the but in there. And I'm like, okay. So I was thinking of it. And it also helps to, I always look at situations if it was me. So even though I'm different and everybody else is different, I'm like, okay, how would that make me feel? So if I was mad and someone said, oh, I would be like, okay, well, it's not about you. So that's another way to look at it. If you're open to, receiving, I feel like it's just going to kind of make sense. And the more you practice it, the easier it gets too. Cause now it's no problem. Like, I don't care. It could be something small, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to do that. Like, and they're just like, okay, so it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. And like what about, cuz you said if it flows well. So what about if you're dealing with someone who's just so very close-minded, very stuck in their perspective? How do you go about resolving the conflict with them?
Okay, so I've I've dealt with a few people like that. They weren't as open as I was. It was hard to read them or read just they didn't know, I feel like, how to communicate their emotions and feelings. So how I do it or how I look at it is I can't I don't have to like deal with that, but I want people to know how I feel toward them. So the best way, or how I handle it, I make sure my point, not really a point, but how I feel is clear. One, because I know, you know how you can talk and you're like, oh, like say you're so mad. And it's like, okay, what am I even talking about? Like you're bringing up stuff from 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And even though your feelings are valid, you have to understand that everybody isn't in your head. Like everybody can't process what you're processing. So I try to, I get everything out, but I try to do it, and I don't know, internally, I just like I know kind of where the person is and what they can take.
Yeah.
So I kind of just in a I have my message be clear. I use words like I felt like, and Jazz helped me with that. Like really, really like, okay, like I feel this. Like sometimes I had a bad habit of like working around it too, like with my feelings, like, but it's like, no, I felt sad. Like I felt sad when you did that. Cause of sometimes you don't want people to feel bad. Like, you don't want to make them feel like they did something if they didn't know. But again, your feelings are valid. So you can be respectful and still say how you felt. So I'll be like, I felt sad when you did A, B, C. And I do provide examples too, because recent examples. So they can kind of remember, like, oh, it can take them back. Hopefully, this is what I imagine someone would do. Take it back, like, okay, when we were at the pizza shop and wow, like I just left or left out. Okay. And if it's okay if you don't get a response, like I feel like sometimes in our minds, we're like, okay, I'm gonna say all of this, and I expect, because you want your answer, no matter what you do, you want them to say, look, to the T, I apologize for A, B, C, and D. But sometimes you have to be okay with not getting that,
Yes.
So, and I had to realize that too. Like, in my head, I'm like, I just want them to say it like this, but you get so stuck on how you want them to say it, it can kind of turn the whole conversation and you go in a whole nother direction. So,
Yes.
you know.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. Like a lot of times we look for people to give us the response that we would
Mhm.
expect from them, and then they don't give us that. So we're still mad. We're still over explaining ourselves, and it's like you really just want to share your feelings. Like the goal is to let them know how
Yeah,
you felt. The goal is not to change them,
right,
their mindset, their perspective. And if that happens, then that's a bonus. That's good.
right.
But a lot of times that does not happen. We end up
And yeah, and everyone's not on like where you are mentally. So that's what I had to understand too. Like, I can't, I mean, we expect it, but you really can't expect because you don't, like I said, it just depends on what you know about that person. Like, I'm over here getting mad and upset when it's like, the person hasn't even probably had this conversation with anybody. So they probably will get very defensive. And you don't want that, or I don't want that. So I just let it out in a respectful, clear, And, it's not like 500-page paragraph, because who's going to read that? But I feel good after I sent my message.
Yeah.
So, and I'm okay with not getting a response now if that's the case. But I know, like, you can just feel when someone read it. And, like, it's like they get it. If they want to act on that, that's not on you. So you have to be okay with just not getting that in return. So.
Yeah. Yeah, you are absolutely right. You have to be okay with not getting the response that you want
Right.
to hear, and that goes, and that's beyond just when we're trying to figure out conflict and resolve a conflict. That goes for a lot of things that you can apply that to in life. Okay, it goes to when it comes to advice, when it comes to getting readings, or like whatever it is. Take away the expectation. And just focus on what it is that you are delivering, what you're contributing to the situation, and what you know for sure you can get out of the situation.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. But I totally agree with what you were saying.
It's hard. I know, like, especially, I mean, it's gotten easier, like I said, but you really have to dig deep within yourself. So it's a lot of self-work you have to do to kind of understand other people. But if you're open and committed to doing it, it should flow.
Absolutely. So what about this, Christina? What if you are, because a lot of people in today's time, in today's society, a lot of people are in this energy where they would rather not talk about the issue at all. They kind of just like don't want to seem weak. They don't want to be vulnerable. Some people deal with anger issues, so they prefer not to even get involved in that type of conflict. So to people who have a hard time even communicating themselves and they feel as if that this is normal, what would you like tell them?
I would tell them you got to start somewhere, because and the thing is, I know, like, sometimes, well, it's easy for us to make excuses for people, like, oh, well, they've been through this, and I get, but you have to come to a realization within inside yourself that something's not working, something's not adding up. So no one's telling you, okay, you have to have it figured out tomorrow. Like, tomorrow you just are gonna be like, everything's gonna be fixed. It's not. It's a process. So I feel like you have to be, again, open and committed to wanting to change. Like, and sometimes, and that's where when we talked about journaling, sometimes I feel like it's hard for people to even see that they're the issue or something's wrong within them. But again, it takes a lot of digging deep within yourself and really listening. And I don't mean listening like, okay, say if someone's talking, yeah, you're there, you're present, but you need to really listen to what the other person is saying. You don't have to agree with everything, but this is just how I feel. If a lot of people, I know my friends, they will always come, they're like, Tina, sometimes you can cut across people, So I'm like, a part of me, I'm like, do I do that? But then it's like, if more than one is saying it and they're coming to you and say, it's like, I have to be like, even if I don't agree with it, I'll always like, okay, let me take a step back. Can you explain to me the situation where that happened? And I feel like it helps when you're open to like working on it. Like, I was always open to working on it. I tell my friends, like, hey, if there's an issue, you can talk to me, because I want to know, what the problem is. I want to fix it. I don't want there to be this uncomfortableness, or I don't want there to be a situation that you feel like you can't talk to me. But people that have a hard time expressing themselves, you just have to get to a point, I feel like, and you just have to like really know and accept that there's things I can work on. Cause I feel like some people, they're like, I'm fine. But I mean, we can all work on something. And if you are hanging with people that really care about your well-being, they want how you have like some friends, or a few, it could be a few, but they have your best interest at heart. You feel it. You need to really like have an open ear and really take what they tell you. Don't get defensive. It's okay to have feelings, but try not to get defensive and really try to understand where they're coming from, because you never know. Some information they give you you might can take, and it will help you. But you have to, I feel like you have to realize it first, because you got to think, if you don't realize it, you don't care to realize it, what change is going to come out of that? So that's why it's important. Sometimes, I'm not saying you have to listen to everybody that surrounds you, because some people you hang with you might not know it, but they might not have your best interest at heart because of other things. But you just have to trust the process, and trust who is within your team, that they want the best for you. And I guess kind of just go from there, like have an open mind, I would say. Have an open mind.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Have an open mind. Having an open mind is just being open to the information that comes your way. Like she said, you have to be open to changing, into like
Mhm.
letting go of the stubbornness, to being open
Right.
to hearing what people are saying. To You have to be open to that, for one. And then if you are open, you have to be able to discern if the information is
Hmm.
coming from a place of growth, or if it's coming from a
Right.
place of deception. Okay.
Right.
So, and that doesn't, like she said, it doesn't mean that when everyone comes to you and they say, it could be five people coming to you telling you there's a problem with you, and how you communicate and how you say things. And those five people, it doesn't matter how they come to you, how their tone and delivery is. It's about the message. Okay. It's
Right.
about the message. So take the message, even if it's triggering, even if it makes you feel some type of way inside. Don't
Hmm.
worry about getting triggered and reacting off that triggered behavior. Just
Hmm.
go ahead and reflect on it. Is this something I need to change within myself?
Right.
And if it is, go work on changing it.
I know it's not as simple for some people, but I know, like, if you really want it, you're gonna figure it out on how to overcome that, I feel like.
Yes, because a lot of times that affects loving relationships and friendships,
Hmm.
and even parental relationships, because there's always one person that's so willing to work it out and talk it out and listen, and then there's another person who just totally is very inconsiderate of that person trying to understand them. So
Yeah.
and that's such a struggle. Like, I feel that's a big struggle. And what I've come to realize is that a lot of people who are blocking out information are people who are afraid of learning themselves, people who are afraid of learning and accepting themselves for who they are. So they don't want nobody to come and tell them nothing about
Yeah.
themselves, because then they might have to change. They might feel like something is wrong. And that's another thing, okay? There's nothing wrong with changing. There's nothing wrong with growth. And people
Mm.
like to make it seem like when there's something in your life that needs attention, that needs you to nurture it and change it, they like to make it seem like they're put in this box by themselves, and like there's something wrong with them as a person. And that's not true. We all go through changes and growth, and we all have to change and grow in order for us
Yeah.
to reach our full potential.
You have to, I feel like you have to know how to adapt. See, that's where, because if you know how to adapt, for example, I know, like, with my dad, right? He's an Aquarius. So he is, he's very smart. He's not too emotional, but I know it comes from a good place. So for a while I struggle with, opening up to him, because I feel like I wasn't being heard sometimes, and he could kind of like miss my whole point and go like over his head. And like sometimes we would have arguments, but I had to, someone has to be the bigger person. Like, it can't be two people trying to get their point across, because nothing ever comes from that. So you're going to have to decide. It's either going to be you. And if you're like, okay, this isn't working, yeah, you might have to step up. And I feel like some people, they don't want to be the bigger. It goes deeper into that. Like, I don't want to be the bigger person because I feel like I don't need to. So it just depends on, what do you want? Like what you said, what do you want out of this? What I want out of this, I wanted my dad to know I care. I want him to know, me expressing I wanted to be able to express myself. clearly to him, like the situation, without him getting upset, without me getting upset. So I had to understand how he works. So, and that took some time, but I have boundaries as well. So throughout the process of me trying to figure that out, I was like, okay, like say like he would get upset. I'm like, okay, I'm not in a place. I knew I'm not in a place to handle this right now because I'm not where I need to be. So I said, hey dad, I'm gonna call you later. Or I'm like, I'm gonna I'm gonna call you later. And it's okay. Like, they should understand that, okay, she doesn't want to talk about this right now. We'll talk about it later. So when you have both parties that kind of are trying to understand the other person and they're respectful, it should it's not going to be easy, but it should, like I said, it should flow. And come to find out, when we were talking one day, he was like, well, Tina, that's just how I grew up. He was like, you know like yelling or like getting your point across, and he was like, I know what I'm saying is right, because what he's saying is right. I just didn't like the way how he communicated all the time. So he was like, that's just how I grew up in that type of environment. So it's not an excuse, but it allowed me to understand him more. And because he's not as emotional, and he'll say stuff like, again, when you're first year, you start going everywhere, he will be like, well, Christina, you don't come up here, you don't see us. And I'm like, I'm working full time. I was in school, but I'm like, okay, let me not internalize this. I'm like, okay, basically what my dad's trying to say is he makes me. But that's just his weird way of saying it. So now I'll text him like every day or every other day, and I'm like, I love you. I hope you have a great. And that's all he really wants. So when you are committed to trying to understand that person, it's ways, and we haven't had like a disagreement since, because I've realized that he's not able to say, hey, Christina, I miss you. I feel lonely. Everyone's out the house. What am I doing? Right. But he's not able to say that to me. But with me taking the steps I did, and like figuring myself out too, because I had to do some work, because I used to get so defensive when he would say something. I'll be like, that is not true. Like, but I'm like, okay, let me take myself out of this. Not a mask, don't put a mask on, but let me take myself out of this, and let me go in let me try a different approach. Because you have to think, if you're doing the same thing, it's not working, what do you normally do? You're going to take a different approach if you want to. So you have to be committed to wanting to have a different approach with certain things that are brought to you. Yeah. And that's where I feel like it just goes into being adaptive, with certain situations and people.
Yes, that's beautiful. That's very beautiful. And I loved how you mentioned you learned your dad's language,
Yeah.
like the way he communicate, you learned it and you adjusted yourself so he could understand you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that you adjusted yourself so you could be on the same level as him. You adjusted yourself so he could understand you and your needs, and then he adjusted himself to meet you halfway. Right. That is very beautiful.
And it's not going to happen off the bat, but when you're consistent, I feel like they'll start to be like, okay, this is how she really operates. Like, okay, so it might take some time, but I do believe if both people are committed and they're able to remove themselves, and I mean, think about it. Like if you're not thinking about yourself and they're thinking of your feelings and you're thinking about theirs, it is going to be met, so.
For sure. Yeah, that is for sure. And I feel like that, like, communication is overlooked, but it's so important. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like that people think that we have communication all figured out because we just been talking to each other all this time. But communication is something that really needs our attention right now, because I feel like majority of us are being pulled away from actually communicating, understanding each other, and being pushed into this area where it's like it's normal to feel misunderstood. Okay, like everyone can agree that they have experienced a moment in their life where they felt unheard or misunderstood or unseen in some type of way. And I feel like that the reason being for that type of energy is because we aren't allowing ourselves to listen to the people around us.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we are getting in such a defensive energy to where we are trying to save our egos. Everyone is trying to save their ego self, to protect their egotistical image. And by ego, we don't mean that everyone is being conceited or anything.
Right.
We just mean that it's difficult for people to put that part of themselves down and just be pure with each other, because that is not normal anymore.
It's not. And it makes me sad though, because it's like I think the older I'm getting, I'm seeing that, and I'm not saying I'm the best communicator, but again, I'm committed to working on it. But I realize like it's easy. I'm not gonna say I've always, but it's easy for me to kind of express how I feel. But I'm realizing like some people it's not. And like it's, I'm like, oh, okay. Like when you get older, I feel like, or you don't have to be older, you could be younger, but you start to really see like, okay, this is how some people operate. Like,
Yes.
it's like when you're meeting different people, like say you're dating and you're like, this is different.
Yes, and it sometimes it's like, because I'm very expressive of my feelings as well. So like if I come across people who are not expressive, and then it's like, to me it'll be something so small, and I'm like,
Mhm.
you can just say it.
I know. And it's like, I'm the type of person, I don't have really any surface level relationships. That's just the type of person I am. Like, I'm very loving. I feel like I'm very nurturing. Like, I really want to know you as a person. Like, anyone I come in contact with, I want to really know you, not fake, not anything like that. So it's hard for me when I come across people because it's like, I love them as a person, but it's like, not we'll butt heads, but like you said, it's like, just say it. But I have to understand, like, because I have another friend and she's maybe like 5 years older than me, and she has a hard time expressing herself, but it's like she'll say something and then she'll pull it back, and I'm like, and then I'll like go off of it, you know, um gently, like I'm like, okay, well, and it's like it just goes back like, oh no, like you met a person like that? It's like they'll
Yes.
let out a little bit and they want to talk more, right? But it's like a guard. It's like they have a guard up, and it's like, oh no, and it's like they start overthinking, like, oh, I said too much. Oh my god, no,
Yeah.
I'm not ready to go there, because then it's like it's a trigger.
Yeah.
So maybe in the past, they were told to maybe not express themselves, or it doesn't matter. So they want to. I feel like people want to, but there are these blockages that prevents them. So that's why it takes special people to realize that, not internalize it. And I'm not saying like you need to, like a relationship, you need to stay with somebody that they're like not intentionally trying to misunderstand you, but they are misunderstanding you, because and even if like it's like, okay, I'm very clear, like how clear can I get with this? But they are so stuck in their own ways, they will like put it on you in a sense, like, because they don't want no heat, they don't want to talk about it. Any type of thing they can think of, they'll switch it back on you, and that becomes unhealthy. So I wouldn't suggest people to stay in that space. But I like, it's like been certain situations like I've said my piece and then that's it, because you can't work with someone, or you can't try to build with someone, and they're like they are normalizing trying to misunderstand you, like,
Yes.
so you have to, like you said, use your good judgment, like, okay, I've been clear. And I'm not saying like you need to communicate it with your friends, but I do like reach out to my friends like, hey, before I say something, like, is there someone that I trust and I know they care for me? Is there a way I could say this better? How does this sound to you? Just because I'm not trying to, I know how I am. So,
Mhm.
I'm open to getting feedback and working on certain things. But once you've said your piece, you have to understand there's nothing more you can do. And I
Mhm.
think it's hard for people to accept that, because they want it to work. They want certain things to just fall into place how it should. But you just have to be at peace with knowing that,
Right.
everyone's not going to be, on your same mental. So,
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely right. And one thing that you said that really stood out was when people like getting a second opinion and like knowing like, okay, is nothing wrong with asking someone, did I do too much here? Do I need to
Mhm.
realliterate myself? Like, do I need to say it again? Or am I done? Did I say enough? Okay.
Yeah.
Like, getting a second opinion is good,
Mhm.
because a lot of times we'll communicate ourselves, and like you said, there will be someone that is committed to misunderstanding us, and we'll keep trying over and over to deliver what we're saying to this person, and they'll keep coming back with all these excuses and all this finger pointing and blame game type thing, and you will burn yourself out trying to explain something to someone that is already got it set in their mind that
Mhm.
you don't know what you're talking about.
Yep. It's like a brick wall.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to save yourself some of the confusion and the headache by
Mhm.
deciding, okay, I've said enough. So if they got it, they got it. If they don't, act accordingly. But
Right.
you have to use your good judgment to make that decision. And that's something that prolongs, I feel like, a lot of situations that need to be ended, because
Right.
you may be looking for this person to tell you something that keeps you around or that keeps the
Mhm.
relationship going, and they're not saying it, but they're not saying too much of anything.
Right. It's so stressed. Like I have dealt with that and it's so stressful because like I feel like I can like I don't know, I just feel like I can kind of sense energy, like how people are moving. So it's like it's like they want to, but it's like you're battling like with yourself. Like you realize like you're going back and forth with with yourself. You're not even going back and forth with them anymore. It's like you and it's like your internal self and like your, like
Yeah,
whatever. But I just feel like I've dealt with that and it gets so unhealthy. It gets so unhealthy. So I just had to find like, and it's not easy, but I had to like find like some peace in just not knowing. Like, and if it's gonna come forward to me when they want to express themselves, okay, I'm all ears. But you can't just be working by yourself. Like it's not gonna end well, and you're just gonna tire yourself out for nothing. When and a lot of I know with me, like if I like someone, a lot of my energy, because I told you I don't have surface level friendships. So I am really invested. Like I don't care who you are. Like you could be just somebody I just met. And I'm like, I appreciate meeting different people and hearing about like their experiences and stuff. So I like to dig deep, but I had to realize everyone doesn't like to dig deep. So, and it's okay, but in relationships, it's hard because it's like you would think you're trying to become one. And so it's hard to do that if someone is like just misunderstanding you. So you have to be like, okay, let me take a step back. I recognize what the issue is here. So you just have to be at peace with that, even though it's hard.
absolutely. Yes, you got to be at peace with not knowing. That's a quote right there. Be at peace with
Mhm.
not knowing sometimes. Okay.
Right.
Okay, Christina. So, what are 5 communication advice, whatever, that you want to give to the people right now?
5 communication advice. Okay, I would say the first one, I would say before anything comes out your mouth, be be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself. And really feel your feelings too. So before you go in where you are. Because if you're on like number 10, you don't want to, I mean, who wants to go into a conversation you're like enraged? So I think it's important for that. The second one, I would say, be okay not getting a response. Be okay with not getting a response. The third one, I would say, don't take things personal. Don't take things personal. Um, and I get we all have feelings, and it's only natural maybe to be defensive, but really try to step out like your comfort zone and really try to understand. So don't take it. It's never always, even if it is with them, right? It's never personal with you. Or I would say it's important to know and understand how your person operates with communication, because you have your way of communicating, but that might not be their way. So it's important to know that. Like, for the example I gave with my dad, like me communicating that way clearly wasn't working. So it's important to know like how they communicate, or if you can. I know maybe you might not get that, but it is important to know how the other party communicates and what does that look like to them.
Yes.
And then the fifth one I would say is learn how to adapt. I feel like if you can adapt, and this can go for anything, and not even just communication, but I mean, because life is hard. Sometimes it's sad. Sometimes you have happy moments, but I'm a Sagittarius, so I know people are like, oh my God, it's just all positive. But that's how I really feel. Like, it's like, girl, but that's how I really feel. Like, any type of hardship I have dealt with, I just know deep down that it's gonna be okay. Like, I know what I need to do. Even if I don't want to admit it to myself, I have a feeling of what I need to do. So if you can adapt, then I just feel like it's easier. It's easier if you know how to adapt with situations, dealing with people, whether you're in your own private space, whether you're at work, just learning how to adapt. That's probably the main thing. Knowing how to adapt in certain situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Christina. I
You're
love
welcome.
those. I love those tips so much that I'm gonna rewatch it and type it out for everybody so they can make sure they soak it up some type of way.
Thanks so much for having me, Jazz.
You're welcome, girl. So we're gonna tell the people bye. We'll see you another time.
Bye, guys.